I still remember the night as if it were carved into my bones. The dining room smelled faintly of roasted chicken and garlic bread, but to me, it might as well have been poison. The table was polished, candles flickered gently, and laughter echoed from my younger brother and my father. I sat there quietly, pushing peas around my plate, trying not to notice how my family's conversation flowed as if I weren't even there. I had grown used to it over the years, being invisible, being treated like an unwanted shadow in a house that was supposed to be my home. But that night, I crossed a line no parent should ever cross. My father placed his fork down, leaned back in his chair, and let out a long sigh. His eyes, cold, sharp, and unflinching, locked onto me. "You know something?" said, his voice cutting through the room. "Sometimes I wonder what our lives would have been like if we never had you." I froze. The peas on my fork slipped back onto the plate. My mind tried to process his words, searching for some hidden joke, some punchline that would soften the blow. But then my mother chimed in, without even blinking. "We regret having you," she said flatly, sipping her wine as if she were discussing the weather. "You've been nothing but a burden since the day you were born." Her words sliced into me, sharper than any knife. For a moment, the room spun. My ears rang, my hands trembled, and my chest tightened, like a fist was crushing it from the inside. I searched my brother's face, hoping, praying that at least he would defend me. But he only smirked, stabbing his fork into a piece of bread, clearly amused by the cruelty. A laugh. My brother laughed. The sound echoed in my skull, like the cruelest soundtrack. "Mom, Dad's right," he added with a chuckle. "If it weren't for them," he gestured toward me with his fork, "our lives would have been so much easier." Everyone laughed, except me. My throat burned as I tried to hold back tears. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists on the table, to ask them why they hated me so much, why I was always the scapegoat. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, I already knew the answer. I had known since I was a child that I wasn't their golden one. My brother was the star athlete, the charming favorite, the one who could do no wrong. I was the mistake, the accident they never wanted but got stuck with anyway. And that night, they finally said it out loud. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, as sandpaper. My fingers clenched beneath the table until my nails dug into my palms. I refused to let them see me cry. Not now. Not when they had just admitted what I had suspected my entire life. "I see," I whispered. My voice was quiet, barely audible over the clinking of glasses. But inside my head, my thoughts screamed. "You'll regret this. One day you'll regret every single word you just said to me." My mother rolled her eyes. "Don't look so dramatic," she said casually, as if she hadn't just shattered me into pieces. "We're just being honest. You should appreciate honesty." Honesty. That's what they called it. My father reached for his drink. "At least now you know," he said coldly. "You'll never be the one we wanted. Accept it. Don't waste our time trying to prove otherwise." The words burned themselves into my memory, branding me like a scar. My fork scraped against the plate as I forced myself to eat, pretending their words didn't matter, pretending I wasn't breaking inside. But every bite was tasteless. Every second felt heavier than the last. The candlelight flickered across their faces, highlighting the cruel satisfaction in their eyes. They enjoyed this. They enjoyed watching me squirm, watching me hold back tears, watching me swallow pain like bitter medicine. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Something broke. And something new was born. For years, I had begged silently for their approval, craved even the smallest scrap of affection, and killed myself trying to make them proud. I had endured their favoritism, their mockery, their cold shoulders, all for a sliver of recognition that never came. But that night, I realized the truth. I would never get it. Not now, not ever. And if they couldn't see my worth, then I would make them choke on it. I sat there quietly as their laughter filled the room again. My hands were steady now, my heart no longer begging for love, but beating with something sharper: resolve. They thought I was weak. They thought I was worthless. They thought I would always sit there, silent and broken. But they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I looked down at my plate, forcing myself to stay calm, forcing myself to keep my mask on. Inside, though, I made a promise, a vow. One day I will make you regret these words. Oh, one day you will look at me and wish you had never said them. One day you will realize that the child you threw away became the person you'd beg to have back. And with that vow burning in my chest like fire, I smiled faintly, not because I was happy, but because I finally understood my purpose. Their cruelty had given me clarity. My brother leaned back in his chair, chuckling again. Look at them. They can't even handle the truth. The truth. No, what he didn't know was that the real truth hadn't been written yet. Soon. They would see it. Soon the people who once told me I was a regret would live long enough to regret me. When I was a child, I used to think every family was like mine. I thought it was normal for parents to have a favorite child and an unwanted one. I thought it was normal to cry yourself to sleep and still wake up the next morning hoping they'd notice you, just once, with kindness in their eyes. But over time, I realized my family wasn't normal. It was toxic, rotten from the inside. From the very beginning, my brother was the golden one. He was born 2 years after me, and from the day he took his first breath, it was like I had ceased to exist. I remember my 5th birthday vividly. The living room was filled with balloons. The cake was decorated with blue frosting, and I had been waiting all day for my parents to sing to me. But when it came time to blow out the candles, my brother, only 3 years old, pushed me aside, and everyone laughed as he blew them out instead. I stood there, frozen, hands clenched, waiting for someone to tell him it was my birthday, not his. But no one did. My mother just clapped and kissed him on the forehead. My father lifted him up and spun him around while the guests cheered. And me, I stood in the corner, invisible, the birthday child no one celebrated. That was the first memory of many. At school, I worked hard, desperate for recognition. I brought home straight A's, thinking maybe this time they'd be proud. Instead, my father waved the report card away like it was nothing. Grades don't matter, he said coldly. But when my brother won a 3rd-place ribbon in a school race, my parents framed it and hung it in the living room. It was always like that. He got the applause, I got the silence. Got the hugs, I got the criticism. He got the car at 16, got a bill for rent. I was always the shadow, the afterthought, the one who could never measure up, no matter how hard I tried. One summer, I saved money from my part-time job to buy my mother a necklace for her birthday. I skipped meals, walked to work instead of taking the bus, and tucked away every dollar until I finally had enough. I wrapped it carefully and placed it on the table, smiling nervously as she opened it. She stared at the small silver chain with a frown. Is this it? She asked. It looks cheap. Then she tossed it aside like it was nothing. Minutes later, my brother walked in with a bouquet of flowers he had picked from the neighbor's yard. She squealed, hugged him tightly, and said, "This is the most thoughtful gift ever." I sat there silently, my heart sinking deeper into my chest. Over time, I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped expecting kindness. I built walls inside myself, walls made of silence and endurance. I told myself, maybe if I just keep going, maybe one day they'll finally see me. But instead, the cruelty grew sharper. When I got my first job at a small cafe, I thought maybe they'd be proud that I was earning money. But my father scoffed. A waiter, that's all you'll ever be. My brother laughed, calling me the servant of the family. Meanwhile, my parents handed him money for a brand new car, paid his tuition, and bragged about him to everyone. And the worst part, I still tried. I still cooked dinner when Mom was tired. I still helped Dad fix things around the house. I still cleaned up after my brother when he left. His mess everywhere, 'cause I thought maybe, just maybe, if I gave enough, they would give me love in return. But they never did. Instead, they mocked me at every turn. I was too quiet, too strange, too plain. My clothes were cheap. My dreams were useless. My efforts were pathetic. Years of this treatment wore me down. Every insult was like a stone piled onto my chest until breathing itself felt like a burden. And yet I kept going. I buried my pain deep inside, plastered on a fake smile, and pretended everything was fine. No one knew how much I cried in secret. No one knew how many nights I whispered into my pillow, "Why wasn't I enough?" The answer, though, came crashing down on that dinner night, the night my parents finally said out loud what they had always shown me through their actions. "We regret having you." Those words weren't born in that moment. They were the echo of years of favoritism, years of neglect, years of cruelty dressed as parenting. That night didn't break me. It revealed what had already been broken long ago. But what my parents didn't realize was this: broken things can be rebuilt. Shattered hearts can be reforged into steel. As I sat there, replaying every memory of neglect, every time they chose him over me, every insult they ever hurled, I felt something change inside me. No longer would I chase their approval. No longer would I beg for their love. No longer would I be the invisible child starving for scraps of affection. That night, I began to write a new story for myself. One where their regret would no longer stay away. One where their regret would no longer define me. One where their cruelty would fuel me. One where, one day, they would look at me and choke on the very words they had thrown at me. And that day was coming sooner than they thought. After that dinner, I didn't sleep for 3 nights straight. I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of my bedroom, listening to the muffled laughter of my parents and brother echoing down the hall. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those words again. "We regret having you." It played like a broken record in my mind. Over and over, each time it cut deeper. At first, I wanted to scream. I wanted to run into their room and demand answers. Why? Why was I never enough? But then I realized, what good would it do? They had already spoken the truth they had carried for years. They didn't love me. They never had. And in that realization, something inside me snapped. I was done begging for love that would never come. The next morning, I made a silent vow as I stood in front of the mirror, my eyes swollen from sleepless nights and silent tears. The person staring back at me wasn't weak anymore. They weren't the child craving scraps of affection. They weren't the shadow cast by their golden sibling. No, they were someone reborn in pains, someone ready to rise. But deciding and doing are two very different things. The first challenge came quickly. 2 days after that dinner, my father stormed into my room without knocking. "Pack your things," he barked. "Your brother needs space. You'll move to the basement." The basement. It was cold, damp, and filled with boxes of junk. Single dim bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering like it was mocking me. My old bed barely fit between the walls. I stood there in silence, my father waiting for me to argue. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, carried my belongings downstairs, and closed the basement door behind me. And that was the first step. Not in surrender, but in freedom, because the basement became my sanctuary. My prison turned into my training ground. I worked double shifts at the cafe, saved every penny, and studied late into the night. While my family laughed upstairs, I sat in that damp room, surrounded by shadows, teaching myself skills that would become my weapons. Business, marketing, coding, finance, anything I could get my hands on. They thought they had buried me in the basement. But what they didn't know was that they had planted me, and I was learning how to grow. The breaking point came when my brother, drunk on his own arrogance, stumbled into the cafe where I worked. He sat at a corner table with his friends, laughing loudly, mocking me in front of them. "Look at my sibling," he sneered, serving coffee like the family disappointment they are. His friends laughed. My cheeks burned, my hands shook, but I smiled politely and set down their drinks. Inside, though, something solidified. This wasn't humiliation anymore. This was fuel. That night, I quit the cafe. Not because of shame, but because I had saved enough to start something of my own, a tiny business at first. Selling handmade crafts online, tutoring students in subjects I had mastered, freelancing in design and writing. I hustled day and night, sleeping only for hours, fueled by determination and rage. Every order I shipped, every client I helped, every dollar I earned was a brick in the empire I was building silently beneath their feet. My parents didn't notice. They were too busy bragging about my brother's new job, which he only got because my father pulled strings. They laughed at me when I came home late, clothes smelling of sweat and exhaustion. Working like a dog, my father sneered. "Pathetic." My mother added. "My brother," he just smirked. "Don't bother. Will never catch up to me." But I didn't argue. I smiled quietly, went back to the basement, and worked harder. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that pain wasn't my weakness, it was my weapon. And with every insult, every slight, every door slammed in my face, I sharpened that weapon until it gleamed. It wasn't easy. There were nights when exhaustion nearly broke me, when my body ached from too many hours of work. When doubt whispered in my ear, "Maybe they're right. Maybe you are nothing." But then I remembered that dinner. I remembered those words, "We regret having you." And I whispered back to myself, "Not for long." That mantra carried me through the darkest nights. Months turned into years. Slowly, but surely, my business grew. What started as a trickle of income became a steady flow. Clients came back, word spread, and opportunities opened like doors I was never allowed to touch before. And while I climbed, my family began to sink. My father's company started losing contracts. My brother's arrogance cost him his job. My mother, once the proud queen of her social circle, was quietly shunned after one too many gossip scandals. The empire they built on favoritism and lies was cracking. And me? The one they called a regret. I was quietly building something unbreakable, but I stayed silent. I stayed in the shadows. I let them believe I was still the weak one, still the disappointment. Because the best revenge isn't loud, it's silent until the moment it explodes. And soon, that moment was coming. The breaking point wasn't just their words at dinner. It wasn't being thrown into the basement. It wasn't being mocked. At work, the real breaking point was me finally realizing that I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I didn't need them. All I needed was the strength they accidentally gave me by trying to destroy me. And now, with every step forward, I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing for the day when they would look at me, the child they regretted, and realize their biggest regret wasn't having me, was underestimating me. Success doesn't happen overnight, doesn't arrive wrapped in ribbons or with applause echoing in the background. No, it comes slowly, like the steady drip of water carving through stone. And in my case, it began with silence. For months, I lived like a ghost in my own home. I worked in the basement, laptop balanced on an old desk, the sound of typing keys filling the space that once echoed with my tears. Every dollar I earned from freelance jobs, I saved. Every client I gained, I treated like gold. Soon, my small side hustles evolved into something bigger. My tutoring work grew so much that I hired other tutors under me. My online crafts business took off when one of my products went viral on social media. And then, a chance project for a client turned into my biggest breakthrough, a startup idea that caught the attention of an investor. Suddenly, the basement wasn't just my hiding place. It was the birthplace of my empire. Meanwhile, upstairs, my family carried on as if nothing had changed. My brother. partied late into the night with money my parents gave him. My mother hosted tea gatherings, gossiping about neighbors. My father struggled to keep his business afloat but pretended everything was fine. They didn't notice the glow of my computer screen at 3 a.m. They didn't notice the quiet determination in my eyes when I walked past them in the mornings. To them, I was still the unwanted child, the regret. And that was my greatest advantage. Because while they ignored me, I built. Over the next 3 years, my startup flourished. Clients turned into contracts, contracts turned into partnerships, and partnerships turned into profits that made my old cafe paycheck look like pocket change. I expanded, hired employees, rented office space, and slowly became someone people respected not because of my family name, but because of me. But I didn't flaunt it. No, I stayed in the shadows. I still lived in that basement, quietly paying rent on time, smiling politely when my parents mocked me. When my brother sneered about my pathetic life, I nodded and excused myself. Let them believe their illusion. Let them live blind to the truth, because I was waiting for the right moment. And then, the moment came. It started with my father. His company was on the verge of collapse. Bad deals, poor management, and his arrogance had drained it dry. One evening, I overheard him in the living room yelling into the phone, "You can't just pull out without this contract? We're finished." I walked past silently, a small smile tugging at my lips. 'Cause what he didn't know was that the very contract he was begging for, the company pulling out, it's mine. Yes, the startup he dismissed as a waste of time had grown into a corporation powerful enough to swallow his. But I didn't reveal it yet. Not then. Then came my brother. After losing his job for showing up drunk too many times, he grew bitter. He spent his days lounging at home, complaining about life being unfair. One night, I heard him shouting at my parents, demanding more money. They gave it to him, of course. They always did. Even when they had nothing left, they scraped together whatever they could to keep their golden boy happy. And yet, when I walked past with a cup of tea, they turned on me. "You should contribute more," my mother snapped. "You live under our roof," my father added coldly. "Don't forget that." I bit my tongue. Could have told them that not only was I paying rent, but I was also quietly covering some of the bills they thought they were paying. I could have told them that the very roof they lived under was already halfway mine, thanks to a deal they didn't know about. But I didn't. Not yet, because the stage wasn't ready. The real opportunity came when my brother announced his engagement. My parents were ecstatic. Finally, the golden child was getting married. And they planned to throw a lavish weddings, despite not having the money to do so. I watched them scramble, borrowing from relatives, selling jewelry, begging for favors, all to make sure my brother's wedding was the event of the year. That's when I knew this would be it. The wedding would be my stage, the place where the unwanted child would rise in front of everyone. The guest list was enormous. Family, friends, distant relatives, business partners. Everyone who had ever looked down on me would be there. Everyone who had whispered that I was the mistake, the disappointment, the regret. And when the time came, I would show them exactly who I had become. The weeks leading up to the wedding were tense. My parents worked tirelessly on preparations, yet they still found time to belittle me. "Don't embarrass us," my mother hissed one evening. "Don't wear anything cheap. If you're lucky, we're even letting you come," my father added. My brother smirked. "Stay out of the photos. We don't need you ruining them." I smiled, nodded, and walked away. If only they knew the truth. If only they knew that the very venue they had booked after endless negotiations and desperate favors belonged to me, yes. The wedding hall, the one they bragged about securing, had been quietly purchased by my company months ago. I had kept the ownership hidden, letting the manager deal with them. But on the day of the wedding, the truth would be impossible to ignore. I could already picture it. The music playing, the guests seated, my parents basking in fake glory, and then the moment when I would step forward. Not as their regret, but as the person they never thought I could be. The thought of it carried me through the days leading. Up to the event, every insult became background noise. Every sneer rolled off me like water, because I knew what was coming. Fa? They thought they had crushed me. They thought they had buried me. Thought I would always be their regret. But soon they would regret ever saying it. The wedding morning smelled like roses and rain. Clouds hung low over the city, but the ballroom lights burned warm and golden. I arrived earlier than anyone else, slipping through the staff entrance in a black suit, hair pinned back, a calm I had earned the hard way. "Good morning, owner," the venue manager said with a small smile. "Everything is ready as you requested." "Thank you," I replied. "No changes unless I say so. Let them write the opening act. We'll handle the finale." By noon, the place buzzed with photographers, florists, and a nervous DJ who kept replaying the same 30 seconds of a love song. My parents swept in like royalty, snapping at staff, correcting everything, and taking credit for anything that didn't move out of their way. My brother strutted behind them, chin high, drunk on attention he hadn't earned. When they finally noticed me, my mother's mouth twisted. Try not to embarrass us," she said, eyeing my suit, "and stay out of the professional photos." My father waved me off. "If anyone asks, you're a distant relative." I smiled. "Of course." The bride arrived with a glittering entourage and a gaze that passed straight through me. Her mother blinked at the seating plan and then at me. "We're moving you," she said, tapping her pen. "Family only at the front." She gestured toward a side door. "Shh, you can sit near the kitchen." I glanced at the venue manager. He gave the tiniest nod. "Not yet," his eyes said. "Let it breathe." So I went. I took the chair by the swinging kitchen door, the same place I'd been assigned at a dozen family events in another life, and listened to the clatter of plates and the hum of indignity. I let the old sting rise and pass like a wave. Then I checked my watch. 2 hours to showtime. Guests flooded in, filling the ballroom with perfume and gossip. My parents preened for cameras. My brother bathed in compliments. Whenever someone asked where I fit into the family, my mother answered quickly, "Oh, they help out sometimes, like swatting a fly." The ceremony began. Vows were read, rings exchanged. The applause was thunderous. Somewhere near the end, I felt a tremor of nerves, not fear, precision. A finale needs timing. During cocktail hour, the photographer herded relatives into perfect lines. When I approached, he glanced at his clipboard. Bride and groom, parents, siblings. My mother slid between us. "Not this one," she said. "They're not immediate family." The photographer hesitated. "But they're not family," my brother added, smiling straight into my face. "We regret the confusion." I looked at the camera lens and saw myself reflected, calm, standing, unshaken. I nodded to the photographer. "It's fine." Then I stepped back and texted the manager a single word. "Ready." Dinner began with speeches. The bride's father toasted perfection. My father toasted legacy. My brother toasted himself. Laughter rolled like thunder. When it was my mother's turn, she clasped the microphone with that brittle smile. "Some people," she said, scanning the room, "teach us what family is by reminding us what it isn't." Her gaze landed on me. The crowd murmured. The manager approached the head table, whispered in my father's ear, and handed him a thin folder. My father frowned, flipping the pages. His smile cracked. He looked at the manager, then at my mother, then at me. "What is this?" he hissed. The manager's voice carried just enough to reach the first few rows. "An administrative formality, sir." The owner of the venue requested acknowledgement. "Owner." My mother repeated, confused. "We booked this place months ago." "Yes," the manager said, turning to the stage. "And they're here." The DJ's music cut mid-note. Lights softened, then tightened into a single white column that fell at my feet. A hush rippled outward as hundreds of faces turned my way. I didn't hurry. I walked to the stage, took the microphone from its stand, and let the silence settle. My hands were steady. My voice carried. Good evening, I said. I'm grateful you're all here to celebrate love. I'm also grateful you're here to witness truth. And his name. Some of you know me only as the person who sits near the kitchen door. Tonight, you will know me for who I am. I nodded to the AV tech. The screens behind me flickered on company logos, headlines, brief clips of product launches, and partnership announcements. The audience murmured louder. I spoke over their surprise, not to boast, but to anchor the facts. 3 years ago, I started a company from a basement. My basement, I said, meeting my parents' eyes. While many of you never saw me, I was building something you couldn't see. That company now employs people in this city. It partners with firms around the country. And last spring, it acquired several assets, including, I gestured gently to the ceiling, the lights, the chandeliers, this venue. The gasp was a wave. My brother's jaw slackened. My mother's smile curdled. My father scanned the folder again as if the words might change. I continued, level and clear. You booked with my manager. You negotiated hard. You told him not to let the wrong kind of people in the photos. You asked the staff to seat me by the kitchen. And they didn't till I asked them not to. I paused. No rage, no shouting, just air and truth. Tonight isn't about revenge, I said. It's about recognition. I was told I wasn't family. I was told I was a regret. I lived years believing I needed your approval to matter. I don't. The room drew closer without moving. I looked at the bride and groom. Congratulations. I genuinely wish you happiness. And in honor of that happiness, I have a gift. I nodded to the manager again. He lifted the mic. Per the owner's instruction, the remaining venue balance is cleared. The newlyweds owe nothing. Staff gratuities are fully covered. The couple's honeymoon suite has been upgraded. Applause burst like rain on a hot street. The bride's eyes filled. She mouthed, "Thank you." My brother tried to turn the tide. "See? That's my sibling." But the current had already shifted. I held up a hand, the room quiet again. But I have one more acknowledgement to make. I faced my parents. My father's face was stone. Kay, my mother's was glass. "Dad," I said evenly, "last month your company lost a crucial contract. The firm that withdrew was mine. Not to hurt you, but because ethics matter. You asked your people to misstate numbers. I won't be party to that. You taught me to be ruthless. I chose to be rigorous." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Pride has no language when truth stands next to it. "Mom," I continued, "you taught me that appearances matter more than people. I believed you until I met people who chose me for who I am, not for how I look beside them in a picture." A murmur, not pity, understanding. I set the microphone down on the clear podium and stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Everyone here, sometimes family is blood. Sometimes blood is poison. I don't say this lightly. I tried for years to earn a place at a table that kept shrinking to push me off. So I built my own table and I choose who sits at it. I turned to the staff. "Please move a chair from the kitchen to the head table." To servers smiling in a way only people who've been seen can smile carried a single elegant chair to the front, set it beside the bride's parents, and looked to me. I nodded. The symbolism was enough. I didn't sit. Instead, I scanned the room one last time. Faces I'd grown up with. Faces that had learned stories about me I didn't, right? Faces that were seeing me without someone else's captions. I took a breath. "I wish you all a good evening. Enjoy the celebration. Tip the staff, they deserve it. And if you need me..." I smiled, the first real one of the night. "You'll find me where I've always been, building something worth belonging to." I handed the microphone back to the manager. The DJ eased in a gentle track. The lights warmed. The room exhaled. My brother stumbled toward me, red with confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" He demanded. "We're family. We are relatives," I said softly. Family is earned. He reached for my arm. I stepped away, not with anger just. With finality, my mother tried next, voice sugar slick. We're proud of you, darling. We always knew you had potential. That's not true, I said, not unkindly. But it's okay that it isn't true. It's just over. My father hovered, words grinding like gears. You humiliated us. No, I said. I unhid myself. I walked past them, down the steps, through the murmurs that were no longer knives. Staff parted for me with small, conspiratorial smiles. Outside, the air was cool. The storm finally breaking into a soft, steady rain. I stood under the awning and let it drum a rhythm on the city. The manager joined me. You could have done worse, he said. You could have canceled the event, evicted them mid-speech. People would have cheered. I didn't need to ruin their day, I replied. I needed to rescue mine. He nodded. What now? Now, I said, feeling the truth. Settle into my bones like a key turning a lock. I go home. My home. Not a basement, not a corner chair. My place. Congratulations, he said. I smiled at the streetlight's reflection in the puddles. Thank you. For the first time, I think I mean that to myself, too. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Not at the gilded doors. Not at the performance resuming inside. Not at the table I had been denied and then offered. The rain was cool and clean and the city smelled like beginning. Somewhere behind me, laughter rose lighter now, not aimed at me. Maybe they'd dance. Maybe they'd drink. Maybe, years from now, they'd tell a story about a wedding where pride met gravity and both of them learned how to land. And if they ever remember the words they once threw like knives, we regret having you they could. Keep them. I had no use for them anymore, 'cause I finally understood. Regret is a chain. Respect is a key. And family isn't blood. It's the people who don't seat you by the kitchen, who hand you a chair without asking, who invited you, who clap when you stand and stay when you fall. I crossed the street, the rain stitching silver lines between my footsteps, and headed toward a door that opened when I touched it, not because of my last name, but because I had built the lock and the key. I went inside. I closed the door on the house where I was a regret and opened the life where I wasn't. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share it with friends, and subscribe to Toxic Bloodlines for more shocking family drama and revenge stories. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll read every single one.